Good morning, everyone. It's Sunday, July 9th. Massachusetts Secretary of Education Patrick Tutwiler is our guest this morning. Let's go on the record. Challenges in the classroom and beyond, from teacher shortages to Supreme Court ruling on affirmative action. The Secretary is here in the chair. Let's go on the record.
From WCVB Channel 5, the inside word from Washington to Beacon Hill. Today's newsmakers are going on the record.
Welcome to OTR, everyone. I'm Ed Harding, along with News Center 5's political reporter Sharman Saketi. It's great to have you with us this morning. And with us at the table, as you can see, is Patrick Tutwiler. He is the Commonwealth Secretary of Education, cabinet-level position in the Healey administration. He also served as the superintendent of schools in Lynn. He knows the classroom as well, teaching history at the high school level for many years. He holds degrees from the College of the Holy Cross, from Harvard, from Boston College. Pat, it's great to have you with us. Thanks for coming in.
Great to be here.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here. Let's start out with affirmative action in education. That is something that you feel strongly about. The Supreme Court recently struck it down as a factor in college admissions. In your view, what is the way forward? How does this impact us moving forward?
Well, the first step is to understand what this kind of decision means in the education space. And we do have examples in states that made a decision to depart from race consciousness and admissions decisions, California being a prominent one. We know what that lived experience is like, and we want to learn from that to make sure that the kinds of declines that they saw in the enrollment of students of color don't happen in Massachusetts.
When you talk about declines in enrollment, you're talking public universities, private universities. What played out there?
In the public university space, and this is the case for California, for Texas, for Washington State, the states that have gone in this direction prior to the Supreme Court decision.
Is the field level now, if you know what I'm saying? Or is it still imbalanced? Are we still? Is it the fact that the High Court has done what it has done? Is it level the field now, or has it created an imbalance in the field?
What the decision did was depart from approximately a half century of settled law, which said very clearly that racial diversity is a compelling interest, a compelling state interest, and thinking about race in admissions decisions was part of the path forward in terms of ensuring that campuses are diverse, in terms of ensuring that our society has a diversity of leaders. And so
did the High Court get it wrong?
In my humble opinion, it did.
It did. Why?
Because it essentially is limiting or hindering efforts that are aligned with the idea that the state has a compelling interest in diversity. When we think about the first decision in 1978, when Justice Powell articulated that the nation's future depends on a cadre of leaders who have wide exposure to the mores and beliefs of students as diverse as this nation, that's important. That's talking about higher education, but it's talking about society at the same time.
What about geographic diversity? What about economic diversity? Those are some things we've heard from advocates of affirmative action that's saying, now colleges are going to have to consider that. Do you think that is the way forward?
That's always been the way forward in colleges and universities in terms of thinking about what sort of compilation or combination of students can we create to allow for the most robust experience for students who are there. So yes, that matters.
As we mentioned in the introduction, that you went to the College of the Holy Cross, like Justice Clarence Thomas. You, too, are a graduate of the College of Holy Cross in Worcester. The college's mascot is a crusader, and Justice Thomas has led a crusade against affirmative action for decades. So what is your take on very different views that you both came to on affirmative action?
I can't speak for
him. Right.
I can't speak for Justice Thomas. But what I will say is my beliefs, the governor's beliefs, our beliefs are deeply aligned with the first two decisions on this matter, and we're going to do everything in our efforts and within our power, within the scope of the law, to ensure that there's representation in higher ed in Massachusetts.
All right. One of the biggest issues for the state education system is the shortage of teachers. This is something we've been seeing since the pandemic certainly hit. Salaries are a big issue. Culture wars are a big issue. What does Massachusetts need to do to attract more teachers? And I wonder if you could tell us really how many openings there are across the state.
Yeah, I can't articulate a specific number, but we know that the numbers are significant statewide. All of the things that you just articulated around around salary, around the culture wars, are things that I think damage the beauty of the profession. The narrative around the profession has been really challenging in recent years, and I don't think that it has the kind of luster that it once did. And so I think it's part of my responsibility to give voice to the fact that these are the things that are hurting classrooms, that are hurting our ability to come back from the pandemic, and we've got work to do.
You're a former teacher. What are your former colleagues telling you? You know, what needs to change?
Just the things that I just mentioned. I mean, I think the research already lays out pretty clear the kinds of things that need to happen in order for teachers to be attracted to the classroom and stay there. They need to be supported. They need to be compensated for the work that they do. They need to be respected, and they need to have a seat at the decision-making table.
But you know very well sometimes some classrooms in some school environments are not safe, and it's uncomfortable for people to work in there. Has that created a problem?
Certainly.
For teachers getting into the occupation.
There is the information is out there around the kinds of challenges that schools are experiencing relative to mental health and dysregulated behaviors in the classroom. But I think we can also shift that to be a call to action for people who want to be part of the solution in terms of solving those problems.
All right. There is a push to drop MCAS as a state graduation requirement. This is no secret to you. And end state takeovers of schools. Teachers union, students, and parents, they have called for lawmakers to pass the Thrive Act, which would stop the state from putting schools into receivership. It would also base graduation requirements on coursework rather than MCAS scores. So where do you stand on this? Should MCAS be dropped?
In alignment with what the governor has been saying for weeks and months now, this is something we want to take a close look at. I will say definitively that assessment does matter. It is important for us to understand where students stand and to align a state strategy to support them.
But as a graduation requirement?
That's something we want to take a look at. Sure.
And with your experience as a former teacher, you know that some kids aren't test takers, but they are brilliant thinkers or they have wonderful minds. Like, so you use the word, some form of achievement measure, which is perhaps a better, I don't know what the standard could be, but is the MCAS the right one, the wrong one? What do you think?
Well, here's what I would say. I deeply believe that every student is capable of passing the MCAS. So you shouldn't be an educator or person who works in the space of education if you don't believe that every student is capable of getting over that hump. But sometimes the hump is wrong, and you need to take a look at it to decide what changes need to be made to it.
It sounds like no changes on the immediate horizon if you're only willing to just look at it.
That is not accurate.
That it is not. If you could expand on that, we'd like that.
When I say we're willing to take a look at it, that is not in any way scoffing at the challenge that the teachers union and others have raised.
So it's possible it could change.
Absolutely.
Soon.
I wouldn't say soon. I'd say it's possible that it could change.
It has been, 1 year since Boston and the state agreed on an improvement plan instead of a state takeover. Education Commissioner Jeffrey Rowley says he's frustrated with the city's progress. Is the state preparing to put Boston Public Schools in receivership?
So that is an authority that rests squarely with the commissioner, and it's my understanding that there is no plan to do that at the present moment. The frustration that he expressed is a result of shortcomings related to the agreement, and I understand that. But I'll also say that both the commissioner and I started our careers in Boston. We have great love for the Boston Public Schools, and we also have great optimism for their ability to move forward.
And the commissioner also criticized BPS for its plan to relocate exam schools, saying that the state was caught off guard. So did Boston not notify the state of these plans, or was the state aware of what Boston
There's no
wanted to do?
requirement.
But there's no requirement. There you go.
So.
But you can't say whether or not right now the state is preparing to put Boston Public Schools in receivership.
There's no plan to do that.
No plan right now.
We're with the Education Secretary, Pat Tutwiler. Stay with us. We'll be back after the break.